Hi, welcome to Manas Shil YouTube channel. Before we start, kindly subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thank you. Let's start the video. If you haven't watched the previous video, I'll link it in the description box, or you can click here. Tensura Volume 19. Chapter 3. The Royal Capital in Flames. Preparations to battle. A short time had passed since the explosion had occurred. Now, at last, the full extent of the enemy could be seen. A riot of the death penalty prisoners. Yes. Moreover, the enemy has freed Prince Elric, who was under house arrest in the north tower of the castle, and has made him their flag bearer. Prince Elric, I see, that man hasn't shown any remorse at all. Elric was in the process of being re-educated due to his blunder at the council. He was on the verge of being deprived of his right to the throne, but Rimuru and King Egil of Ingratia, who didn't want to make things worse, agreed that he would be reduced to the first degree of guilt as he was only being used at the time. Still, it was a disgrace to the royal family, and for the past year he had been under house arrest in the north tower of the castle, but it seems that he had fallen into the hands of the enemy. To make matters worse, he seemed to be voluntarily cooperating with them. Not only that, but Elric and the others were accusing Hinata by name. My dear people, I have been deceived by a witch. She has framed me, and ruined my standing in the council. And now she wants to murder my father, and bring chaos and misery to this land. Do not be fooled. She is trying to take away your freedom on the pretext of evacuating you. I trust that my dear and wise people will understand whose words are correct, said Prince Elric, who was apparently making a speech in the city's main square. Is that true? I heard it with my own ears. Can you corroborate? I can't get into the royal castle at the moment. I am checking it via Luminism's followers, but they seem to be quite confused. Then there's a good chance that King Egil has been killed. What a terrible thing. It was a headache of a problem. Although she had expected a mob to be incited, she hadn't expected someone to make the worst choice at the worst time. To make matters worse, it was the royal family of the Kingdom of Ingratia who were the cause of Hinata's troubles. Prince Elric had caused problems, but the details of those problems had not been made public. That was an issue, and it only complicated the situation. He was using his position as a member of the royal family to the fullest to mobilize the power of the state. Even Hinata had not expected to see such a disruption in cooperation with the parties during an emergency situation. Now then, what should we do? A white-haired beauty garbed in a military uniform appeared in front of Hinata as she pondered this. Leaning back on the sofa as gracefully as if she were the owner of the room, the beautiful woman, Tensura, opened her mouth. I've gotten proof. Moss has confirmed with his own eyes that Egil was murdered. In other words, the upper management of this country is unreliable. All hell is breaking loose, isn't it? Tensura nodded with a laugh, saying that the castle was in a state of chaos. Yes. Going back and forth, the chain of command is in chaos. That's right, Hinata nodded in agreement. Well, Gadra has been ordered to protect the council chamber, so the safety of the dignitaries is guaranteed. Tensura assured her that he could at least buy them some time. This was a pretty high evaluation, and Gadra was surprisingly well acknowledged. Well, that does offer a bit of relief. Tensura and Hinata nodded at each other. However, now things had become tricky. Not only was there an unknown enemy, but there was also someone who wanted to harm Hinata. They seemed to be accusing Hinata by name for being a witch who misled people, but this was difficult to deny. It would not have been a problem if the enemy was just an ordinary person. If they were a nobleman, Luminism's public power could have crushed him. But this was the royal family of this country. The biggest problem of all was that Prince Elric was very popular among the people. Prince Elric was a handsome man with delicate manners, and he was popular among women. Regardless of his abilities, he was popular with the people because of his good-natured exterior. His blunder in the council was not known to the people and was irrelevant. Hinata, though well known, was shunned for her cold-heartedness. In terms of popularity, she was far behind Prince Elric. Incidentally, Hinata herself was not aware of the fact that she had a huge following among some people with certain tastes. The group was quite gentlemanly, as they had the common sense to know that it would end once they were known. All that aside, the problem now, as about Prince Elric. The subordinates were looking at Hinata anxiously. That was only natural. Because the prince of this country was loudly denouncing Hinata to fuel the people's anxieties. He was calling her King Slayer, a witch enchanted by the demon lord, and someone who would lead the people to ruin. But even so, I can't believe I didn't expect him to be such a fool. Inwardly, Hinata cursed herself for being so careless. She hadn't seen Prince Elric for the fool he was. Hinata had never expected that he would go to such horrible lengths to kill his father and usurp the throne. Just then, there was a knock at the door, and a knight entered the room. It was Arnaud Baumann, one of the captains of the Holy Knight Order, Hinata's trusted subordinate. Hinata-sama, we have also confirmed the presence of Reiner, the former knight commander of the Kingdom of Ingratia. In addition, we have confirmed the presence of dozens of knights who were supposed to have been captured as his accomplices. Arnaud reported as soon as he entered the room. Then it was Reiner who murdered the king, wasn't it? I'm sure of it. He's been framed as the culprit, but I doubt he'll have the chance to explain himself in court. Hinata let out a big sigh and thought, Reiner, that freaking bastard. How dare he hold a grudge against Hinata-sama, just because he was beat up at the council meeting. Fritz, one of the captains waiting in the room, complained indignantly. According to Arnaud's explanation, Reiner, who had been intimidated by Hinata at the council meeting and had made the mistake of being incarcerated, was eager to clear his name. For this reason, he was planning to defeat Hinata in public to clear his name. It was a ridiculous story, the crime being committed out of personal resentment. However, the root of the problem was deep. Reiner took forceful measures to make up for his mistake. This was the common understanding of everyone, but there was no way to prove it. The whole thing was a setup, and the evidence seemed to have been destroyed. There was a way to get other countries' representatives to testify, but that was only possible during peace times. In such a case of emergency, they could not endanger the senators, and the people would not believe anything Hinata and the others had to say now anyway. Unfortunately, Prince Elric was very popular in this country. It was as clear as day who the people would believe. Hinata-sama has never had a good reputation. Fritz quipped, and Arnaud gave a small nod of agreement. Glaring at the two, Hinata changed the subject with a comment of her own. I guess we're on the back burner. But even so, I didn't think he would kill his own father, the king. He seems to be trying to pin the blame on Hinata-sama, but that's just absurd. Hinata's mutter was echoed by Arnaud. The purpose of Prince Elric and Reiner was obvious. They wanted to take advantage of the chaos and pretend that all their own blunders and sins had never happened. Rather than taking revenge on Hinata, they may be using this as a check against other nations. They may be thinking that by defeating Hinata, the strongest of the Western nations, they would be able to shut down protests from other nations. But I don't understand. I don't think this Reiner guy was good enough to assassinate the king. From Hinata's point of view, Reiner was not weak, but he was not strong either. He was the equivalent of an over-A-rank adventurer. A country as large as Ingratia should have several other knights who could rival Reiner. Moreover, the magical inquisitors who were present at the council meeting at that time should have been able to overpower Reiner. How this tragedy had succeeded was more of a mystery to her. The answer came from Cardinal Nicholas, who visited Hinata. Apparently, the magical inquisitors have all been killed. We had information that they were conducting a suspicious experiment in the underground of this place, but it seems that the experimental entities have gone out of control. Nicholas, huh? I have come with a message from Luminous-sama, but I decided to look into this while I was here. Nicholas replied, competent as ever. He was like a loyal dog who would do anything to be praised by Hinata. He was merciless to everyone other than Hinata, but he was also very good at keeping up appearances. He maintained an expression of warmth and was well liked by his followers. However, for those who knew his true nature, he was not someone they wanted to have anything to do with. In fact, Arnaud and Fritz kept a low profile, avoiding eye contact with Nicholas. Ignoring these outsiders, Nicholas began to brew a pot of tea. He was a very diligent man who also earned points in this way. He prepared a cup of tea for Tensura as well, and she looked satisfied when she took a sip of it. This was indicative of a very high score, and proved that Nicholas was no ordinary person. Hinata also sipped her tea, and collected her thoughts. What if, rather than taking advantage of the chaos, this whole mess is just what Elric and the others want? But those are monsters running rampant in the city, aren't they? That's the first thing that's strange. How could a monster break into the royal capital that's protected by the city barriers? To begin with, the strength of the monsters is also rubbish, isn't it? The monsters reported were not in one, but rather several at the same time. They were said to be rampaging all over the capital, but their purpose was unknown. They were said to be going around destroying anything and everything they could find. Moreover, it seems that they had ultra-speed regeneration, which allowed them to repair their wounds immediately. The fighting ability was more than that of a holy knight. Fortunately, they seemed to be of low intelligence, and the knights were currently preparing decoys to minimize the damage. Judging that it would be dangerous to deal with them individually, the soldiers were ordered to stay behind, for now. After considering how to deal with them, Hinata was scheduled to go into battle in the worst-case scenario, But now a problem had arisen that they had to worry about. Tensura joined the conversation. On that note, it seems that some of my subordinates have been defeated. They were under strict orders to retreat before they died, so I didn't get much information. She didn't get much, but would still disclose the information she had. Tensura's subordinates were the Devil Chevaliers. All of them are special A rank, with existence values of over 100,000. It was no surprise that the magical inquisitors were no match for such a group of Devil Chevaliers who had chosen to retreat. Apparently, the experimental subjects were incarnated by angels. What is that? The ones that failed to incarnate are the monsters that are running rampant right now, and the ones who still have their egos intact. The enemy who had defeated the Devil Chevaliers, Tensura was convinced that it was one of Michael's men. After hearing Tensura's explanation, Hinata tapped her fingers on the desk. The two remaining Holy Knight captains in the room were Orno and Fritz. Leonard, the second in command, was in charge on the scene with Bacchus and Ritus in tow. Thanks to the training in the labyrinth, even the common Holy Knights who were not captains had grown into powerful warriors. In fact, the captains had become so strong that they were capable of defeating claimant-like opponents on their own. However, against an experiment of magical inquisitors fused with the power of angels, it would be dangerous to take them on head-on. And with Michael's shadow flickering in the background as Remuer's adversary, she decided that they shouldn't get involved carelessly. Nicholas, you have a message from Luminous, right? That's right. She says it's not an urgent matter, but she can't send reinforcements. That means there are other enemies. Luminous would never abandon Hinata. Therefore, the fact that she could not send reinforcements meant that there was a high possibility of other threats lurking about. If that was the case, they would have to protect the security of the royal capital with only the forces currently at hand. This is tough. That was the conclusion that Hinata came to. No matter how much the Holy Knight's abilities had improved, it was still a heavy burden to have them take on an enemy that was clearly superior to them. What's more, the monster has taken in the power of angels and had become a light attribute. The holy purification barrier, which was effective against normal monsters, would not be effective at all. Well then, what should we do? Our usual winning tactics wouldn't work. That's true. It would be one thing if it was just the monsters, but there were also Reiner and the others. That Reiner fellow, he is probably a success. Tensura said, but only Hinata and Nicholas understood what she meant. What do you mean by that? Arnaud asked fearfully. I tell you to think for yourself a little, but we don't have much time. If Reiner was also on death row, it wouldn't be strange if he was used as an experiment, right? I see, so it's possible that he's taken in the power of an angel. Arnaud and Fritz understood, and their faces paled at the same time. It's not a possibility. Consider it a certainty. Tensura told them ruthlessly. Now, that being the case, it was impossible for the Holy Knight Order to deal with this matter alone. Inevitably, it would be important to cooperate with Tensura's forces. So, what are you going to do? Tensura asked, and Hinata answered without hesitation. I'm sure it's what the enemy wants, but I suppose we'll have to go to them for an explanation. Prince Elric claimed that Hinata was a kingslayer. There was no reason for Hinata to do such a thing, and she had a perfect alibi of being at the World Conference, so it was impossible for her claim to be accepted. However, that would only be true in normal peace times. The current situation in the royal capital was chaotic. Thank you for watching. Hope you enjoy it.